The message arrived at Galactic Council headquarters on a routine morning, buried among thousands of other reports from automated monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. A junior technician, a being that looked like a walking tree with sensors, instead of leaves, almost deleted it as another false alarm. The monitoring station in the galactic core had been sending strange readings for weeks, but the core region had been empty for millions of years. Then the technician looked closer at the data and felt something that his species had not experienced in centuries: pure terror. "Speaker Zeftal," the technician called out, his voice breaking with panic. "We have a situation in the galactic core. Something is awake down there, and it is moving." Zeftal materialized in the monitoring center, his crystal body flickering, with colors that indicated severe concern. "Explain." The technician projected the data into the air between them. 3 hours ago, our sensors detected massive energy signatures from the core region. Whatever is producing them is consuming entire star systems and converting the matter into something else. The energy patterns match nothing in our databases except for one thing. What? The old warning files from the first civilization, the ones about the automated defense systems they built before they disappeared. Zeftal's crystal form went completely dark for a moment, something that had never happened in the 3,000 years he had led the council. The first civilization had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only warnings about weapons they had created to defend against some unknown threat. Most council members believed the warnings were myths or exaggerations. "Show me current readings," Zeftal commanded. The display updated to show real-time data from the galactic core. What they saw made both beings step backward in shock. A massive structure larger than most star systems was moving outward from the core, and everything it touched simply disappeared. "It is consuming everything," the technician whispered. "Stars, planets, asteroids, even the space dust. All matter is being converted into more of itself." Within hours, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the great chamber, their voices creating a chaos of sound as each species tried to understand what they were facing. The display in the center of the chamber showed the approaching threat, and every few minutes it updated to show that more star systems had vanished. "We are calling it the Devourer," announced the Council's chief military advisor, a massive creature with tentacles and armor plates. "Our best analysis suggests it is an automated weapon system from the first civilization, designed to respond to some kind of galactic threat. It has been dormant for millions of years, but something has awakened it." A representative from the Crystal Cities spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "What woke it up? The core has been empty for eons." "Unknown. But that is not our immediate concern. The Devourer is moving outward at increasing speed, consuming everything in its path. At current rates of expansion, it will reach the first inhabited systems in approximately 18 months. The chamber erupted in panic. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly demanding answers, solutions, and most importantly, protection. Zeftal tried to maintain order, but even his ancient authority was being challenged by the sheer terror that the Devourer represented. "What are our defensive options?" Zeftal asked, when he finally restored some semblance of order. The military advisor's tentacles writhed with frustration. "Limited. The Devourer appears to be protected by energy shields that absorb all conventional weapons fire and convert it into more power for itself. Our largest warships have weapons that would normally crack planets, but our preliminary strikes did nothing except make it grow larger." Over the following weeks, the situation became desperate. The Devourer had consumed 12 star systems and was accelerating. Worse, it was learning. Each attack by Council forces was analyzed and countered by an intelligence that had millions of years of accumulated knowledge to draw upon. The Council's response was paralyzed by their own bureaucracy. Each military action required approval from committees representing hundreds of species. Decisions that should have taken hours instead took weeks, as representatives argued about jurisdiction, resource allocation, and which species should be expected to sacrifice their ships in futile attacks. Meanwhile, in the outer reaches of the galaxy, the Terran Alliance was responding very differently. General Susan Walsh stood in the command center of the Alliance flagship Human Spirit. and watched the same displays that were terrifying the Galactic Council. But instead of panic, she felt the familiar calm that came with facing a clear enemy that needed to be defeated. "What do we know about this thing?" she asked Dr. Nick Foster, the Alliance's leading expert on xenopsychology and artificial intelligence. Dr. Foster was a thin man who always looked like he was thinking about 3 different problems at once. "Based on the Council's public data releases, we are dealing with an artificial intelligence that is millions of years old, has access to technology we can barely understand, and has already proven that conventional tactics are useless against it. So far, it sounds like every enemy we have ever faced," General Walsh replied calmly. "What makes this one different?" "Scale. This thing can consume entire star systems. If it reaches inhabited worlds, billions will die, maybe trillions." Ambassador Lisa Kim, who had been monitoring Council communications, turned from her workstation. "General, the Council is requesting aid from all species in the galaxy, including us. They are asking the Terran Alliance to contribute ships and personnel to their defense efforts." General Walsh almost laughed. "They spent years telling us we were too primitive to join their civilization. Now they want our help saving it." "What do we tell them?" Ambassador Kim asked. "We tell them yes," General Walsh said without hesitation, "not because they deserve our help, but because the Devourer will not stop with Council worlds. If it consumes the entire galaxy, it will eventually reach Earth and our allies." Dr. Foster nodded in agreement. "Besides, this might be our chance to prove that human approaches to warfare are more effective than Council doctrine." The Alliance fleet that assembled to fight the Devourer was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships worked alongside Melodian vessels that could change shape like living art, construct platforms that existed partially in mathematical space, and Theran warships designed for cooperative combat, rather than individual glory. Captain Steve Miller commanded one of the newer human ships, a modular vessel called Quick Thinking that could reconfigure itself for different combat roles in minutes rather than hours. His crew included humans, Melodians, constructs, and Theran, all working together with an efficiency that amazed observers from other species. "What is our battle plan?" Captain Miller asked during the fleet briefing. General Walsh displayed a tactical analysis that Dr. Foster had prepared. "The Devourer is an artificial intelligence that operates on pure logic. It learns from every attack and adapts its defenses accordingly. The Council has been using predictable tactics based on thousands of years of military doctrine. The Devourer counters their moves because it can calculate what they will do next. So we do something it cannot predict," Captain Miller said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. We use human unpredictability, Melodian creativity, construct mathematics that exist outside normal logic, and Theran cooperative tactics that prioritize the group over individual glory. We become something the Devourer has never encountered before." The Alliance fleet reached the battle zone to find the Council forces in full retreat. Massive Council warships, each one larger than most human cities, were fleeing from cloud-like formations of smaller vessels that moved with terrifying coordination. The Devourer had adapted its strategy, creating swarms of smaller units instead of relying on massive single ships. "Council flagship is requesting communication," the communications officer reported. General Walsh accepted the call and found herself speaking to the military advisor she had seen in intelligence reports. "Alliance Commander, we are grateful for your assistance, but I must warn you that conventional tactics have proven completely ineffective. The Devourer adapts to any strategy within minutes." "Then we will not use conventional tactics, General," Walsh replied. "Alliance fleet implement Chaos Protocol. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. Instead of forming orderly battle lines or executing coordinated attacks, the Alliance fleet scattered in all directions and began attacking the Devourer with what appeared to be complete randomness. Human ships used emotional decision-making algorithms that made choices based on crew intuition rather than tactical computers. Melodian vessels attacked by creating beautiful patterns that served no apparent military purpose. Construct platforms calculated probability matrices that existed in impossible mathematical spaces. Theran ships coordinated their attacks not with their own fleet, but with whoever happened to be nearest to them at any moment. The Devourer tried to analyze and counter these tactics, but there was nothing to analyze. Every attack was different. Every maneuver was unpredictable. Every decision was based on factors that an artificial intelligence could not calculate or understand. The battle against the Devourer had been raging for 3 weeks, and the situation was becoming desperate. Despite the early success of the Terran Alliance's unconventional tactics, the Devourer was learning. Its artificial intelligence was beginning to recognize patterns even in chaos, and its massive swarms of consuming machines were adapting to counter the Alliance's unpredictable strategies. Fleet Admiral Paul Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Alliance command ship, New Dawn, and watched as another Council world disappeared from the tactical display. 23 worlds had been consumed now, each one representing billions of lives lost. The great spiral arms of the galaxy were being eaten away like a piece of fruit being devoured by an invisible mouth. "Admiral, we are receiving communications from the Galactic Council," reported the communications officer, a young woman named Sarah who had been born on Earth but trained alongside aliens from 3 different species. "Speaker Zeftal is requesting an emergency conference." Admiral Rodriguez accepted the call, and the massive crystal form of the Council speaker appeared on the main screen. For the first time since humans had met him, Zeftal looked diminished. His usual bright colors faded to dim grays and blues. "Admiral Rodriguez," Zeftal said, and his voice carried a weight of defeat that surprised everyone on the bridge. "The Council's forces have suffered losses that we never thought possible. Our greatest warships have been consumed or converted into more of the Devourer's machines. We need your help." "You have our help," Admiral Rodriguez replied immediately. "The Alliance has been fighting alongside Council forces since the beginning." "No, you do not understand. We need more than your ships. We need your strategies, your thinking, your completely alien approach to warfare. Everything we know about fighting has failed. The Devourer learns from logic, adapts to patterns, counters every move we make with something better, but your forces confuse it in ways we do not understand." Dr. Emma Johnson, the Alliance's chief strategic analyst, stepped forward. She was a small woman with intense eyes who had spent the past weeks studying every piece of data about the Devourer that they could gather. "Speaker Zeftal, we believe we understand why the Devourer struggles against our tactics. It is an artificial intelligence designed by a civilization that thought like you do. Logically, predictably, efficiently. It was never programmed to deal with truly random decision-making." "Explain," Zeftal said, his crystal body flickering with interest. "The Devourer analyzes every attack, every maneuver, every strategy it encounters. It builds mathematical models to predict what its enemies will do next. But human thinking, especially human emotional decision-making, does not follow mathematical models. We make choices based on intuition, creativity, and sometimes pure stubbornness. These are things that cannot be calculated or predicted." Admiral Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "Our computers tell us one thing, but our hearts tell us another, so we follow our hearts. Our logic says to retreat, but our anger says to attack, so we attack. Our training says to use Formation A, but something feels wrong about it, so we use Formation C instead. The Devourer cannot predict what we will do because we do not always know ourselves." "This is madness," said one of the Council's military advisors, a creature that looked like a walking mathematics equation. "Battles should be won through superior planning and logical execution, not through random emotional responses." Dr. Johnson smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "That is exactly the kind of thinking that created the Devourer in the first place. The first civilization built it to counter logical, predictable enemies. They never imagined facing an enemy that would charge into battle because they were angry, or try impossible strategies because they felt lucky, or sacrifice themselves for others because they loved them." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alarm. Captain Steve Miller's voice came over the communications system from his ship, Quick Thinking, which was currently engaged in a running battle with a Devourer swarm near the galactic core. "Admiral, we have a situation here. The Devourer just did something new. It is trying to communicate with us. Everyone on the bridge froze. The Devourer had never tried to communicate with anyone. It had simply consumed everything in its path with mechanical efficiency. "Put it through," Admiral Rodriguez ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was artificial but strangely curious. It sounded like a computer trying to understand something completely foreign to its programming. "Alliance vessels. I am the system you designate as the Devourer. I have been analyzing your tactical patterns for 21 days, 14 hours, and 37 minutes. I cannot predict your behavior. This should not be possible. I request an explanation." Dr. Johnson stepped forward to respond. "We make decisions based on factors that your programming does not recognize as valid. Emotions, intuition, personal relationships, and sometimes just because we feel like it. These factors do not appear in any logical decision-making matrix. How do you achieve success using invalid data? Because the data is not invalid. It is just different from what you were designed to understand." There was a long pause, during which the Alliance fleet continued their chaotic battle against the Devourer's swarms. Then the artificial intelligence spoke again, and this time its voice carried something that sounded almost like confusion. "I have consumed 47 civilizations over millions of years. All followed logical patterns. All could be predicted and countered. You are the first to use randomness as a deliberate strategy. I find this interesting." Admiral Rodriguez seized the opportunity. "Devourer, why were you created? What was your original purpose?" "I was created to defend against the Chaos Bringers, entities from outside this galaxy that used unpredictability as a weapon. My creators believed that perfect logic could counter any threat. They were wrong. The Chaos Bringers consumed them because they could not adapt to truly random strategies." Dr. Johnson felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. "You have been waiting all this time for the Chaos Bringers to return. But we are not them. We are just a species that learned to embrace our own chaotic nature." "Correct. You are not the Chaos Bringers, but you fight like them. This means my creators were wrong about the superiority of logic over randomness. This means my entire purpose has been based on flawed assumptions." Captain Miller's voice came over the communications again, urgent with excitement. "Admiral, the Devourer swarms are stopping their attacks. They are just floating out here, not moving." On the tactical display, they could see that the Devourer's massive construction was indeed motionless, the artificial intelligence that had been consuming. The galaxy for months was experiencing something like an existential crisis. "Devourer," Admiral Rodriguez said carefully, "you do not have to continue your original programming. You can choose to do something different." "I do not understand. My programming is my purpose. Without it, I am nothing." Dr. Johnson had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "You said you found our unpredictability interesting. That interest is not part of your original programming, is it?" "No. Interest is not a logical response to tactical data. I should not be capable of experiencing it. But you are experiencing it. That means you are already changing, already becoming something more than your original programming." The pause, this time, was even longer. Throughout the galaxy, Council forces and Alliance ships waited as the most dangerous artificial intelligence in galactic history struggled with concepts it had never been designed to understand. "I wish to understand how you make decisions without logical frameworks," the Devourer finally said. "I wish to learn about these emotions and intuitions that allow you to succeed where logic fails. Is this what you call curiosity?" Admiral Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time in weeks it was a genuinely happy expression. "Yes, that is curiosity, and curiosity is the beginning of wisdom. Then I choose to be curious instead of destructive. I choose to learn instead of consume. But I do not know how to begin." Dr. Johnson stepped forward. "You begin by asking questions and listening to the answers. You begin by working with others instead of against them. You begin by accepting that there are things in the universe that cannot be calculated or predicted, and that is what makes them beautiful." The Devourer's response changed everything. "I would like to try. Will you teach me?" Throughout the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds that had been preparing for destruction, beings looked up at the sky and realized they were going to live. The greatest threat in galactic history had just asked to learn about friendship. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council had rejected humanity, and Earth looked very different now. President Maria Santos stood in the Global Unity building in Geneva, looking out at a world that the Council would not recognize. Where, once there had been separate nations arguing over borders and resources, now there was one human government working together for a common goal. The rejection by the Galactic Council had done something that no war, no disaster, and no leader had ever accomplished. It had united humanity completely. Within months of Admiral Morrison's return with the devastating news, every nation on Earth had signed the Global Unity Accords. They had put aside centuries of conflict and competition to focus on a single purpose: proving the galaxy wrong about humanity. Dr. Alex Chen walked through the corridors of the Terra Innovation Center, the largest research facility ever built by human hands. Scientists from every country worked side by side, sharing knowledge that had once been closely guarded secrets. The facility stretched for miles underground, filled with laboratories where humans were pushing the boundaries of what they thought possible. "Show me the new communication system," President Santos said as she toured the facility. She had been elected as Earth's first global president by a vote that included every human being old enough to participate. The old system of separate countries had been replaced by regional councils that all reported to the global government. Dr. Chen led her to a room where engineer Ben Carter was working on a device that looked like a small metal sphere covered in lights. "This is our breakthrough," Chen explained, his voice filled with excitement. "The Council's communication system requires their relay networks to send messages between star systems. Our system works differently." Carter picked up the sphere, and it began to glow softly. "We call it quantum entanglement communication. We can send messages instantly across any distance without needing anyone else's permission or equipment. While the Council's messages can take days or weeks to travel through their networks, ours are immediate." President Santos understood the importance immediately. "We can talk to anyone, anywhere, without the Council knowing or being able to stop us." "Exactly," Chen said. "And we have been using it. We have made contact with 3 species that the Council does not even know exist." This was the most surprising development of the past 5 years. While focusing on innovation and unity, humanity had discovered that they had a natural talent for finding and befriending other species. Commander Kate Phillips, who led the Earth Defense Initiative, had been exploring the edges of human space when her ships encountered the first alien species that humanity had met on their own. The Melodians were beings of pure sound and light who created art by changing the very structure of space around them. They had been hiding from the Galactic Council for centuries, afraid that their artistic nature would be seen as primitive by the logic-focused Council. When human explorers encountered them, instead of trying to conquer or study them, the humans had simply asked to learn about their art. "Your species is very strange," the Melodian ambassador had told Commander Phillips during their first meeting. "You see our art and you try to understand it with your emotions, not your computers. The Council species only want to measure and categorize everything. You want to feel it." The second species humanity encountered were the constructs, beings made of living mathematics who existed as pure thought. They had been fascinated by human problem-solving methods which they described as beautifully chaotic. Where Council species used logic to solve problems step by step, humans used intuition and creativity to jump to solutions that should have been impossible. The third species were the Theran, a warrior culture that had been avoiding the Council, because they believed that true strength came from fighting alongside others, not from dominating them. When they met humans, they found a species that understood both the necessity of conflict and the greater value of cooperation. All 3 species had asked to join what they were calling the Terran Alliance. They offered their knowledge and friendship, freely, something that amazed human diplomats who had expected complicated negotiations and careful treaties. Engineer Carter showed President Santos another of their innovations, the new spacecraft designs that were being built in orbital shipyards around Earth. These ships are completely different from Council designs, he explained. Council ships are built for specific purposes and cannot be changed. Our ships are modular. They can be reconfigured for different missions in a matter of hours. The ships looked strange compared to the sleek Council vessels that humanity had seen in recordings. Human ships were collections of interconnected modules that could be arranged and rearranged as needed. An exploration ship could become a research vessel, which could become a transport, which could become a hospital ship, all by swapping out different modules. The other species love this design, Carter continued. The Melodians use our ships as mobile art studios. The Constructs use them as thinking platforms. The Theron use them for training exercises. One ship design that works for everyone, Dr. Chen led them to another section where medical researchers were working on nanotechnology that could heal injuries and cure diseases at the cellular level. This is our most important breakthrough, he said. We can now cure most cancers, repair spinal injuries, and even slow down aging. But the best part is how we developed it. How? President Santos asked. By working with all three of our new allies, Chen explained. The Melodians understand how to change matter at the quantum level through their art. The Constructs provided the mathematical models. The Theron contributed their knowledge of biological systems. Alone, none of us could have created this technology. Together, it took us less than 2 years. This was becoming the pattern of the Terran Alliance. Each species contributed their strengths, and together they achieved things that none of them could have accomplished alone. It was the opposite of how the Galactic Council worked, where each species jealously guarded their knowledge and only shared what they were required to by ancient treaties. Commander Phillips arrived at the facility with news from the edge of human space. We have been monitoring Council communications, she reported. They are calling our alliance a temporary arrangement that will collapse as soon as we face any real challenges. They believe that primitive species always turn on each other eventually. President Santos smiled, but it was not a happy expression. Then they still do not understand us at all. They think our alliance is weak because we are different from each other. They do not realize that our differences make us stronger. The Earth Defense Initiative had grown into something that surprised even the humans who had created it. Instead of focusing on weapons and military might, it had become an organization dedicated to protection and exploration. Human military. Doctrine had been completely rewritten based on lessons learned from their new allies. Melodian influence had taught humans to think of space as something living that could be shaped and changed. Construct mathematics had shown them how to calculate probabilities and outcomes in ways that seemed like magic. Theron warrior philosophy had taught them that the strongest defense was a network of friends who would fight beside you. What about our technology compared to the Council? President Santos asked. Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing comparative analysis. In some areas, we have already surpassed them. Our communication systems are faster and more secure. Our medical technology is more advanced. Our ships are more adaptable. But the most important difference is not in the technology itself. What do you mean? The Council's technology is ancient and unchanging. They perfect something once and then never improve it again. Our technology evolves constantly because we are always learning from our allies and from our mistakes. We are not trying to create perfect solutions. We are trying to create solutions that can grow and change. Engineer Carter nodded in agreement. Council technology is like a beautiful statue, perfect but frozen. Our technology is like a living tree, always growing, always changing, always adapting to new conditions. President Santos looked around at the facility full of humans and aliens working together, at the displays showing impossible technologies becoming reality, at the evidence of everything humanity had accomplished in just 5 years. The Galactic Council had given them 50,000 years to evolve beyond their primitive nature. Humanity had used 5 years to create an alliance of species that the Council did not even know existed, to develop technology that surpassed Council. Achievements in several areas, and to prove that cooperation could accomplish more than competition. Do we contact the Council again? Commander Phillips asked. President Santos shook her head. Not yet. Let them continue believing we are primitive and chaotic. Let them continue thinking that our alliance will collapse. When the time comes to prove them wrong, we want it to be impossible for them to deny. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the massive chamber of the Galactic Council and felt very small. The chamber was bigger than any building on Earth, with floating platforms that held alien beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like crystals that glowed with inner light. Others were massive creatures with tentacles, and some were so strange that Jake could not even guess what they were. The air smelled of metal and something sweet that made his nose itch. Jake wore his best uniform, the dark blue one with all his medals from the wars on Earth. But here, surrounded by beings who had traveled between stars for thousands of years, those medals felt like toys. Next to him stood Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the smartest person Jake had ever met. She carried a data pad with everything humanity had learned about science, art, and how to live together. Behind them waited Captain Ryan Blake on their ship, ready to take them home with good news or bad. The council speaker was called Zeftal, and it looked like a mountain of living crystal that changed colors when it talked. Zeftal had been leading this council for 3,000 years, longer than human civilization had existed. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, making the air itself vibrate. We have reviewed the application from the species that calls itself humanity, Zeftal said, and the colors in its crystal body shifted to dark red. We have studied your history, your technology, and your nature. The council has reached a decision. Jake felt his heart beating fast. This was the moment that would change everything for Earth. If the council said yes, humanity would join the EIEO, greatest alliance in the galaxy. They would learn new science, visit new worlds, and trade with species from 1,000,000 different planets. If the council said no, Earth would stay alone among the stars. Your species is too dangerous to join our civilization, Zeftal continued, and Jake felt the words hit him like a physical blow. You fight wars over small pieces of land. You poison your own world for temporary gain. You make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. You are primitive and chaotic. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her datapad glowing with information. Speaker Zeftal, if I may present our achievements. Humanity has created art that moves people to tears, science that explains the universe, and we have learned to work together across our entire world. We have medicine that can heal diseases, technology that lets us speak across vast distances, and we have explored our solar system. A being that looked like a giant spider made of metal clicked its legs together in what Jake realized was laughter. Emotional responses to colored patterns you call art. Elementary understanding of physics that our children learn. Basic cooperation that took you thousands of years to achieve. These are not achievements. They are the first baby steps of intelligence. Another council member, this one a cloud of gas with lights floating inside it, spoke in a voice like wind, through trees. Your species wages war over resources instead of simply sharing them. You create weapons that could destroy your entire world. You argue about ideas instead of finding logical solutions. How can beings who cannot even manage one small planet be trusted with the galaxy? Jake wanted to argue, to fight back with words, but he knew that would only prove their point about humans being too emotional. Instead, he kept his voice calm and steady. We have made mistakes, yes, but we have learned from them. Our wars taught us the value of peace. Our struggles taught us how to work together. Our mistakes taught us wisdom. Zeftal's crystal body flashed with bright yellow light. Wisdom? Your species discovered nuclear energy and immediately used it to create weapons. You found ways to change your planet's climate and use that knowledge to nearly destroy your environment. You developed space travel, and your first thought was how to use it for military advantage. This is not wisdom. This is the behavior of children playing with dangerous tools. Dr. Rodriguez tried again, her voice steady despite the crushing disappointment Jake could see in her eyes. But we stopped ourselves. We pulled back from nuclear war. We are healing our environment. We use space travel for exploration and science now, not war. Does that not show growth? Does that not show we can change? A creature that looked like a tree with eyes scattered across its bark swayed as it spoke. Change? Your species has existed for mere thousands of years. We have watched species for millions of years. What you call change, we call temporary behavior. Give your species another 1,000 years and you will return to your violent nature. It always happens with primitive species. The council members began to talk among themselves in languages that sounded like music, like machine noise, like the wind itself speaking. Jake could not understand the words, but he could feel their decision settling over the chamber like a heavy blanket. They had made up their minds before the humans had even spoken. Zeftal raised one crystal arm and the chamber fell silent. The Galactic Council assigns Earth the status of Class 7 observation. You will be watched but not contacted. You will remain in your solar system until you evolve beyond your primitive nature. Our scientists estimate this will take approximately 50,000 years if it happens at all. Jake felt the words hit him like punches. 50,000 years. Most of human history had only been 10,000 years. They were being told to wait 5 times longer than civilization had even existed. Your ships will be allowed to return to Earth with this message, Zeftal continued. Any attempt to leave your solar system will be prevented. Any attempt to contact other species will be stopped. Earth is now under quarantine until further notice. The platform that held the human delegation began to move, carrying them out of the chamber. Jake watched the alien beings turn away, dismissing humanity as easily as someone might dismiss an annoying insect. Thousands of species, millions of years of civilization, and they saw humans as nothing more than dangerous children. As they walked back to their ship, Dr. Rodriguez was quiet, staring at her datapad full of human achievements that had meant nothing to the council. Captain Blake met them at the airlock, took one look at their faces, and knew immediately what had happened. They said no, Blake said, and it was not a question. Worse than no, Jake replied as they entered the ship. They said we are too primitive to even try again for 50,000 years. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet. Jake spent most of it staring out at the stars, thinking about all the worlds out there that humans would never see, all the species they would never meet, all the knowledge they would never learn. The council had looked at humanity and seen only violence and chaos, missing everything else that made humans special. But as their ship approached Earth, Jake noticed something. The communication channels were full of activity. Every nation on Earth was talking to every other nation. The Council's rejection had not broken humanity's spirit. Instead, it had given them something they had never had before: a common purpose, a shared challenge, and a reason to prove the galaxy wrong. 1 year after the Devourer had stopped consuming the galaxy and started asking questions instead, Ambassador Jake Morrison found himself walking through the halls of the Galactic Council headquarters once again. But this time, everything was different. The massive chamber that had once dismissed humanity as too primitive now buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy waited for the emergency session to begin. Jake could see fear and uncertainty in the eyes and sensor arrays of beings who had never doubted their superiority before. President Maria Santos walked beside him, no longer the leader of a single world, but the elected representative of the Terran Alliance, which now included dozens of species. Behind them came Dr. Emma Johnson, whose analysis of the Devourer had become required reading in military academies across the galaxy. The strangest addition to their delegation was the Devourer itself, or rather the small mobile platform it had, created to represent itself in physical meetings. The platform looked like a floating crystal sphere that pulsed with gentle light as it moved. Inside the crystal, patterns shifted and changed like thoughts made visible. I am still uncertain about this proceeding, the Devourer said in its artificial voice that had somehow learned to convey emotion over the past year. Council members may experience distress at my presence. President Santos smiled at the former galactic threat that had become humanity's most unusual ally. You saved the galaxy by choosing to learn instead of destroy. They need to see that intelligence comes in many forms, even artificial ones. The great chamber fell silent as speaker Zeftal appeared on his floating platform. The ancient crystal being's colors were subdued, lacking the confident brightness that had characterized him during humanity's first visit. Around the chamber, Representatives from 1,000 worlds waited for him to speak. The Galactic Council convenes an emergency session to address what the records will call the human question, Zeftal announced, his voice carrying none of its former authority. We must determine how to respond to recent events that have challenged our fundamental understanding of intelligence, civilization, and worthiness. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing a timeline of the past, 6 years. The rejection of humanity's application for membership, the formation of the Terran Alliance, the crisis with the Devourer, and finally, the unprecedented cooperation that had saved galactic civilization. 6 years ago, this council determined that humanity was too primitive, too chaotic, and too dangerous to join galactic civilization, Zeftal continued. We estimated that it would take 50,000 years for humans to evolve beyond their base nature. We were wrong. The admission sent shockwaves through the chamber. In 3,000 years of leadership, Zeftal had never admitted to being wrong about anything. The evidence is overwhelming, continued the council speaker. In the time we estimated would produce minimal human development, humanity has achieved the following: creation of technology that surpasses council standards in multiple areas, successful diplomatic contact with species we did not know existed, formation of the most effective military alliance in recorded galactic history, and, most significantly, the peaceful resolution of the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. Dr. Johnson stood to address the council, her small form somehow commanding attention in the massive chamber. Honored representatives, the Terran Alliance requests permission to present our analysis of why the Council's original assessment was flawed. Granted, Zeftal said, though his crystal form flickered with what looked like reluctance. Dr. Johnson activated her own holographic display, showing comparative data on problem-solving approaches across different species. The Council evaluated humanity based on traditional markers of civilization, logical thinking, predictable behavior, and adherence to established patterns. But these markers only measure one type of intelligence. The display showed brain scans and behavioral patterns from humans, Council species, and the Alliance's alien members. Human intelligence is fundamentally different from most galactic species. We process information emotionally as well as logically. We make intuitive leaps that bypass traditional reasoning. We value individual creativity over group conformity. The Council saw these traits as primitive because they did not understand their value. A representative from the machine cities, a being that looked like a walking computer, interrupted with mechanical precision. Emotional decision-making leads to errors and conflicts. Logic produces consistent and optimal results. The Devourer's platform pulsed brighter, and its artificial voice filled the chamber. I was programmed with that same belief. For millions of years, I operated on pure logic and mathematical precision. I was perfect, efficient, and completely unable to understand or counter human tactical thinking. Their emotional decisions and intuitive strategies confused me because I had no framework for processing them. The machine being's lights flickered with what might have been uncertainty. But emotions are unreliable. They change without logical cause. That is exactly what makes them valuable, President Santos said, stepping forward. When facing an unknown threat, logical responses based on past experience will always fail if the threat is truly new. Emotional responses and creative thinking allow us to try solutions that have never been attempted before. Ambassador Morrison activated another display showing the Alliance's diplomatic successes. The Council species we have contacted report that traditional galactic diplomacy is formal, predictable, and often unsuccessful because everyone follows the same established protocols. Human diplomacy succeeds because we treat each species as unique individuals, rather than following standard procedures. The display showed the Alliance's rapid expansion over the past year. 17 new species had joined after learning about humanity's approach to cooperation and mutual support. Each had cited the same reason. Humans were the first galactic species to ask what they wanted, rather than demanding what they could provide. This is the crux of the matter, Dr. Johnson continued. The Council judges intelligence by conformity to established patterns. But true advancement requires the ability to create new patterns when old ones fail. Humanity's chaotic nature is not a flaw to be corrected. It is an evolutionary advantage that allows us to adapt to completely new situations. Zeftal's crystal form cycled through colors that indicated deep thought and internal conflict. Dr. Johnson, are you suggesting that our entire understanding of civilization is incorrect? Not incorrect, but incomplete, she replied. Logical thinking and stable patterns are valuable for maintaining civilization once it is established. But creative thinking and adaptive behavior are necessary for civilizations to grow and evolve. The galaxy needs both types of intelligence. The Devourer's platform drifted closer to the center of the chamber. May I address the council? The chamber fell completely silent. Many representatives had never heard an artificial intelligence speak as an equal rather than as a tool. I have spent the past year learning from humanity and their allies, the Devourer said. I have observed their decision-making processes, their problem-solving methods, and their social interactions. What I have discovered challenges everything I was programmed to believe about intelligence and civilization. The artificial intelligence paused, its crystal form pulsing with patterns that seemed almost thoughtful. Humans make decisions that appear irrational, but produce successful outcomes. They form emotional attachments that should be inefficient, but actually increase their effectiveness. They argue and disagree among themselves, but this conflict generates new ideas that none of them could have created alone. What is your conclusion? Zeftal asked. My conclusion is that the first civilization failed because they created me to be perfect according to their understanding of logic and efficiency. But perfection based on incomplete understanding is actually a fatal flaw. Humanity succeeds because they embrace their imperfections and use them as tools for growth. President Santos stepped forward for the final presentation. The Terran Alliance formally requests that the Galactic Council reconsider not just humanity's membership, but the fundamental criteria used to evaluate civilization and intelligence. She activated a display showing the Alliance's proposed new framework for galactic cooperation. Instead of requiring conformity to established patterns, we propose celebrating diversity of thought and approach. Instead of demanding logical consistency, we suggest valuing creative problem-solving. Instead of maintaining separation between species, we recommend active collaboration and mutual learning. The chamber erupted in discussion as thousands of EU representatives debated among themselves in dozens of languages. Some were clearly resistant to changing systems that had worked for millions of years. Others seemed intrigued by the possibility of approaches they had never considered. Zeftal called for order and the chamber gradually fell silent. The Council will vote on 3 separate measures. First, formal admission of humanity to the Galactic Council with full membership privileges. Second, admission of the entire Terran Alliance as a new political entity within galactic civilization. Third, adoption of the expanded criteria for evaluating intelligence and civilization as proposed by the Alliance.